So in this evening's lecture, I will focus on three aspects of the dream that may be elicited from Kabbalistic and Hasidic sources. One, the portrayal of the dream as a text. Two, the dream as fictional truth, that is, the truth whose truth it is to be false. And three, the dream as what I call an event of self-nullification, or in Hebrew, bitul hayesh. Okay. So let me begin with dream as text. The first of the three topics concerns the identification of the dream as a text and the corollary proposition that dream interpretation is a form of exegesis, an idea that should be familiar to people from Freud, and there are scholars have argued Freud took this central idea from the rabbinic material. So the key saying in the Babylonian Talmud, which appears in Brachot 56a, is that presents this idea is Kol chalamot holchim achar hapeh, all dreams follow the mouth. And this parallels a statement attributed to Rabbi Yochanan in the Palestinian Talmud, Kol hachalamot holchin achar pitronehem, all dreams follow their interpretation. So we can speak of a hermeneutical circle that the stuff of the dream is determined by its interpretability, though the latter is determined by the stuff of the dream. We're reminded of this wisdom in a statement that's transmitted in the name of Bar Kapara, Leit chalom she'en lo pitron, there is no dream that does not have an interpretation. Now, this maxim doesn't simply imply the trivial fact that every dream has an interpretation, but the more radical notion that the interpretation is constitutive of the dream. So to speak of a dream without interpretation is as meaningless as speaking of a text without a reader. So interpretation fulfills the same purpose in relation to the dream. There is no dream without an interpreter. So in this light, we should consider the text number 1. So the teaching that all dreams follow the mouth is offered here as the rationale to legitimate the multivalency of the dream, which in the Talmudic context means not only that manifold interpretations of a dream are possible, but that they all will be fulfilled, a harder thing for the human mind to comprehend. So the example of Joseph is given in this text. And Joseph is the paradigmatic interpreter of dreams in Jewish lore, and his example is cited as the biblical basis for this principle. And the wide-ranging repercussions of this may be adduced by the qualifying remark attributed to Rava that it is valid to say that the meaning of the dream is made real by the interpretation only in the case that the interpretation corresponds to the content of the dream. So, notwithstanding the qualification of Rava, the rabbinic idea bespeaks an audacious hermeneutic that endows the interpreter with the power to make the image of the dream come true. The implication of the rabbinic teaching is made explicit in several passages in Sefer HaZohar, the anthology of Kabbalistic lore that began to circulate in the 13th and 14th centuries, went through an extensive process of scribal transmission. The manuscripts were redacted into the printed versions of Mantua and Cremona in the 16th century. So let's turn to text number 2. So as we find often in Zoharic homilies, this passage is a tapestry woven from the threads of various rabbinic dicta. The cord that ties the different sources together is the belief that nothing in the lower world materializes except through the divine decree that can be delivered in the form of prophecy, a dream, or the chirping of birds. And what is of particular importance for our purposes is that the Talmudic maxim that all dreams follow the mouth is explained by reference to another rabbinic view that the dream comprises both truth and deception. So interpretive skill is required to separate the wheat from the chaff. And precisely because there is this mixture of truth and falsity, the dream can portend either good or evil, and thus its result will be dependent on how it's interpreted. The creative potency of the dream interpretation to mold events in time is related to the larger Kabbalistic premise that the word rules over everything. So the remark can be taken as confirmation of the primacy accorded to language, which is an essential postulate of Jewish esotericism through the ages. So more profoundly for the Kabbalists, the word is not only the agency of the divine creation, it is the very substance of creation. After decades of study, I have not discovered any Kabbalist who would not agree to the view that what exists in the world are the manifold permutations of the 22 Hebrew letters, themselves thought to be enfolded in the Tetragrammaton, which is identified as the mystical essence of the Torah. In the second passage from the Zohar, this would be text number 3, from a section called Sabah de Mishpatim, we can discern an effort to distinguish the dream from scriptural exegesis. So after stating that the Torah does not consist of words of a dream, whose meaning is determined by the mouth that interprets them, but which nonetheless must be interpreted in a manner that corresponds to the dream, the Zoharic author insists that with respect to scriptural words, it is even more imperative that they be rendered in concurrence with the way of truth, even though each one embraces multiple words of wisdom. So the contrast between the dream and the Torah only underlies the element that ties the two together. So just as a dream has a manifest and a latent meaning, so the literal word of Scripture comprises hidden meanings that must be extracted through skillful exegesis. A point that's made later on in this section of the Zohar with the claim that the wise ones who are full of eyes can see the light of the divine mysteries radiating through the garment of the letters. The exact language is migo levusha. That is, one apprehends the secret through the garment and not by removing it. Okay, now I'm going to skip a number of texts that deal or try to contrast dream and prophecy, and most of them are based on the rabbinic idea that the dream is 1/60th of prophecy. So the text that I'm skipping, all of them seem to confirm the rabbinic conviction that after the demise of the institution of prophecy, the matter of prophetic inspiration becomes the patrimony of the sages, the Chachamim. But it's also found, according to the Zoharic texts, in dreams and in the speech of birds. And so what they all have in common is that they call for the need for interpretation, which is connected in the Zoharic texts with the last of the Sphiratic potencies, Malchut or Shekhinah. And so to cite one text that makes the point, and this would be text number 6. So now I'll have to fill in something from the text that we skipped, that the place of the dreams is actually below the realm of the Sphirot, and it's attached specifically to the angel Gabriel. But in this passage, it says the interpretation is actually higher from the dream because it's, in the language of this text, b'dibur kayama milah. The matter is established or fulfilled by the word, and again here the word is a technical reference to the last of the Sphirot, the Shekhinah or Malchut. Yeah. So here we see the profundity of the idea that the interpretation is actually higher than the dream itself. And this is the esoteric import of Joseph's response to Pharaoh, to Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker, Le'Elohim Pitronim. So the explication of dreams draws its efficacy from the gradation to which the name Elohim is assigned, which is again the 10th emanation or the Shekhinah. Okay, now I want to turn to the second theme, dream as fictional truth. And the key text from the Talmud, which is the basis for this idea, is a teaching attributed to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai and transmitted in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Just as wheat cannot be without straw, so there can be no dream without nonsense, or Dvarim Petelim, text number 9. The prophetic text that's being interpreted in the Talmudic passage is Jeremiah 23:28, which seeks to establish a clear boundary between the true reception of the divine decree and a false dream. That is, the former is compared to wheat and the latter to straw. The rabbinic interpretation presumes that the verse instructs us that every dream is composed of straw and wheat, truth and untruth. And this Talmudic dictum is adapted in several passages in the Zohar, and I've translated 2 of them, text number 10 and 11. So one can detect 2 principal interpretations of the rabbinic maxim that there can be no dream without nonsense in the Zoharic homilies, either that some dreams are true and others are false, or that there is no dream that is not a mixture of truth and falsity. So in the passages that were read, there is an echo of both explanations, but the predominant drift seems to stress the latter option, which, if you recall, was the intent of the Talmudic tradition attributed to Simeon ben Yochai. So in the first passage, or text number 10, the mixture of truth and falsity is related to the idea that dreams are consequent to the interpretation of the mouth. Since the dream contains both falsity and truth, it can be either true or false based on its interpretation. In the second passage, or text number 11, a distinction is made between worthy and unworthy souls. The dreams of worthy souls, personified by Daniel, are exclusively truthful, whereas the dreams of unworthy souls comprise both true matters and false matters. And we're told additionally that the false matters are imparted by demonic forces. I think a more interesting dimension of this Kabbalistic reinterpretation of the rabbinic tradition can be elicited from a passage from the Sefer HaNikud by Joseph Gigatilia, who was a Spanish Kabbalist with close links to the Zoharic compilation. And this would be text number 12. So every dream is a fusion of vain matters, right, and truth. Even the dream of prophecy, which is distinguished from commonplace dreams insofar as it's completely truthful, but even dreams of prophecy must employ figurative language, mishalim, that are literally false, with the exception of the prophecy of Moses. And here, Gigatilia and other Kabbalists would follow a distinction made by Maimonides. The fact that every dream includes false matters is due to the inherent limitations of the material body and the imagination, which is always dependent on sensations that in turn are tied to the body. But the knowledge that we access through dreams transcends those very limitations. Indeed, the dream is the means to reach the highest level of knowledge, which is in fact an unknowing. I would say a gnosis that is an agnosis. The thought that cannot be thought, but as what cannot be thought. But that's the point, actually. It's the nonsense of the dream here that's transformed into a higher kind of sense, which is literally nonsense. So, and this aspect of the dream, Chalom, is represented by the Cholem, the vowel that symbolizes the emanation of Keter, or the divine nothing, Ayin, since this vowel is positioned on top of the consonants. So in light of the connection between the dream and Keter, the act of dreaming is mystically conceived as a state of contemplation, hitbodedut, that facilitates the mental ascent of the soul separated from the body and its absorption in the divine nothingness, or the ayin. As Gigatilia emphasizes, this contemplative ideal, again, hitbodedut, is related to the rabbinic teaching that there is no dream without false matters, insofar as the source of the dream is Keter, the place in the divine where opposites coincide. So there is no truth that is not at the same time untruth, and no untruth that is not also at the same time truth. Yeah, so Keter is the uppermost of the 10 Sfirot, and it's characterized by a coincidenti oppositorum, a coincidence of opposites. So there's no more distinction between left and right, white and black, good and evil. So just as Keter is characterized by this state of coincidence of opposites, in the state of conjunction or dveikut with a divine nothing, the dreamer is endowed with the capacity to turn one thing into its opposite. And the two most important activities which encapsulate this are, from the human perspective, teshuvah, repentance, and from the divine perspective, forgiveness, because both have the power to transpose judgment into mercy, and therefore Keter is called by Jigatilia Olam Shekulo Rachamim, a world that's completely merciful. So the point is made clear in a comment, this will be text 13, which is transmitted in the name of Pinchas of Koretz, who was a close companion of Israel ben Eliezer, the Baal Shem Tov, or the Besht. It was text number 13. So the use of the philosophical notion of Heilig matter is meant to underscore that the dream originates from the void, wherein everything possible is actual, because what is actual is nothing but the possible. And translated psychologically, this image denotes that the annihilation, the bitul of the dreamer's self, and the assimilation of the dreamer into the infinity, where it is no longer possible to differentiate between opposites like truth and untruth. So consequently, the dream, we could say, is the supreme mode of knowledge, which is the absence of knowledge, or an unknowing that destabilizes the distinction between sense and nonsense. Okay, so now I'm going to turn to the third theme, which we've already touched upon, the dream as the unio mystica and a prolepsis of redemption. And to illustrate these ideas, I'm going to turn to the teachings of Chabad, Lubavitch, and particularly the teaching of the Alter Rebbe, Shner Zalman of Liadi. I choose Chabad not only because I'm in Russia, but I do think that this literature preserves one of the more sophisticated accounts of the nexus between imagination, dream vision, nocturnality, exile, redemption, and mystical annihilation. Okay, so the first passage is from Torah Or, this will be text 14, which is an anthology of Shner Zalman's homilies on Genesis and Exodus, which was compiled by his grandson Menachem Mendel, or better known as the Tzemach Tzedek. The text appears in context where Shner Zalman is trying to explain the dreams of Joseph. Okay, so the opening verse from Psalm 26 forges a connection between the hope for redemption, the restoration of Zion, and the act of dreaming. But as we're quick to learn, the dream is also aligned here with exile, since the latter is depicted metaphorically as sleep, and dream occurs during sleep. During sleep, the intellectual faculty, which is marked as the faculty that distinguishes one thing from its opposite, retreats, and the imagination, which is characterized by the tendency to combine one thing and its opposite, dominates. In the continuation of the passage, Shner Zalman offers a further clarification of this combining of discordant images that is central to the dream. Using the symbolism of Lurianic Kabbalah, the nature of exile is described as the spark of the soul, the pneumatic spark, being enclosed in the garment of the body. But the imprisonment of the soul in the body is necessary for the soul to carry out the drama of liberating the sparks through an act of purification. Now, despite this characterization of the material world as a place where the soul is trapped and needs to be redeemed, it's important to emphasize that for Chabad, as for other Hasidic masters, the overcoming of the body is achieved through a transformation of the body rather than its obliteration. Now, this basic tenet of Chabad, which is a specific application of the doctrine of avodah b'gashmiyut, which is often singled out as the distinguishing element of Bechdin Hasidism, is expressed by Shneir Zalman here in his insistence that even one enwrapped in tefillah, the love of God of necessity is realized through the love that one enacts with and through one's body. So to appreciate this, we should remember that Shneir Zalman distinguished two kinds of worship. The first is a form of ecstasy or hitpa'alut, which he designates as ahava rabbah, the great love, that is so intense that the heart cannot contain it, and therefore the soul yearns to leave the body. And the second is a form of ecstasy that can be contained by the vessel of the heart, and its primary purpose is to draw down the divine overflow from above into the material world, which a theme that is repeated in Chabad over and over again by the phrase diraba tachtonim, to create a habitation for God below. So worship consists of two phases: self-annihilation, bitul hayesh, that results from the conjunction of the soul to the infinite light, and the drawing down of the light through the fulfillment of Torah and the ritual commandments to sustain the cosmos. So from a chronological perspective, you could say the latter is consequent to the former. However, from the perspective of the incorporation, the hitkalalut of all things in the infinite essence, the atzmut ein sof, the two must be viewed as expressions of a single phenomenon. And so it's from that point of view that worship is compared to the dream, for it too partakes of the paradoxical collusion of polarities or opposites. Only one divested of corporeality is in the position to sustain the corporeal. So despite the negative characterization of the dream and its connection to darkness and exile, it's by means of the dream that one can attain the mystical state of integration in the infinite, or disintegration, in which all difference is overcome. So the propensity of the dreaming imagination to combine opposites is the psychological analog to the ontological coincidentia oppositorum, or what Chabad masters refer to as the great mystery of two opposites in one subject, shnei hafachim b'nosei echad. And the ultimate expression of this shnei hafachim b'nosei echad is the realization that the material world is really nothing but the light of infinity. So the finite is the infinite. And this anticipates the messianic moment. As you know, there's a lot of discussion about messianism and Chabad, but very few people have actually paid attention to what the teaching is about. And so what it is about is the gilui, the disclosure, the revelation of the light of infinity in the material world, which is to say the realization that the world is the manifestation of the infinite. Right. So repeatedly in the Chabad masters, they speak of the messianic moment as a disclosure of the essence without a garment. But what that really means is coming to see that there is no seeing, but through the garment that is the world. So that's why the seventh Rebbe repeatedly said that in the messianic movement, it will be revealed that matter is higher than the soul. So back to the dream. It's emphasized that the dream is rooted in the supernal perimeter, the makif elyon, which is the aspect of the Godhead that precedes the vision into binaries, or technically it's called the place of equanimity, hashva'ah, where opposites coincide. Now, we've seen that in the Zohar already, the dream was characterized by this mixture of what is true and what is untrue. And this is underlying Shneir Zalman's emphasis that the dream has the power to combine discordant images. And support for this can be elicited from a comment offered by the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson of the Ra'ayats. This would be text number 17. So, prima facie, the final assertion is rather startling, since it implies that prayer, like the dream, is a compound of truth and deception. But how can this be? So to grasp the secret, we have to recall again what I said previously, that for the Chabad masters, the highest rank of worship is the complete eradication that ensues from the worshiper being bound to the infinite light. This nullification is so absolute that not only the worshiper, but worship and the worship too are annihilated in the total disintegration of all being and non-being, in the void that is the essence, what is designated as bitul hametziut, which is even higher than bitul hayesh. So just as the truthful elements of the dream are connected with what is patently false, so too in the matter of worship in the exilic state, one's continued sense of autonomy as an embodied being in the finite universe, thought to be independent of the infinite divinity, is a dissimilitude. So in the formulation of the Rayats, the dream is the deceit that dissimulates as truth, sheker nidmeh la'emet, as opposed to the deceit that covers the truth, sheker mechaseh al ha'emet. So just as the dream is this highest form of agnosis, because it is through the dreamlike state which one achieves in the proper mode of mystical worship, that one can see through the veil of concealment, ha'elam, that is the world, ha'olam, according to a wordplay that appears repeatedly in Chabad. So to cite the Rayats, again, the continuation of the passage, this is the intent of we will be as dreamers, to combine two opposites as one, for if one's worship and prayer was authentic, then all day long one would fulfill in all your ways know him, for the trace of the prayer will remain with him, and he will be mindful of divinity constantly in all affairs and activities. Okay, so I'm coming to the conclusion. So judged by reason, the dream is the most impossible, literally the impossible of the impossible, since it occasions the manifestation of the essence, the Gilui Ha'atzmut, that is essentially beyond manifestation. So in this way, the dream anticipates the messianic future, in which there will be this disclosure of the essence without any obstacle. But as I've already explained, what this really amounts to is seeing the veil unveiled as the veil. I would say the Kabbalistic wisdom is that there is no naked truth, because if truth were naked, there would be no truth to behold. And here I would see a very close resemblance to the Kabbalistic wisdom and Sufism, where it's repeatedly emphasized that the object is to clean the heart so it becomes a mirror in which the truth can be seen without a veil. But the true depth of that wisdom is to see without a veil means to come to see that there is no seeing but through a veil. So by way of summary, we can say that the dream imagination is privileged as the way to reach the unknowable and unnameable essence, as it is the mental faculty that combines opposites and thus points to the mystery of equanimity, or the state of indifference wherein opposites are identical. So that the highest level of consciousness is a kind of removal of consciousness, which paradoxically occurs when the mind is in a state of sleep and there is no consciousness. So through the dream, the schism or the gap between sleep and wakefulness and exile and redemption is finally transcended in the luminal darkness, wherein the disparity between dark and light is no longer operative.